Christian's breath misted in the chill air as he surveyed the cavernous expanse of the abandoned textile factory. Shafts of late afternoon light pierced through the broken panes, casting shadows that danced on the dust-covered floors. The skeletal remains of machinery loomed like silent guardians of a bygone era. It was here, among the echoes of industrial decay, that he and his friends had chosen to ring in the new year. Creepy vibe, right? Tina's voice cut through the silence, her tone more excited than concerned. She clapped her hands together, the sound sharp and sudden. Perfect for our party. Emma hugged herself, rubbing her arms for warmth. Her gaze flitted over the graffitied walls and shattered windows. It's got character, she admitted, though her voice betrayed her unease. Michael stepped forward, flashlight in hand, illuminating the dark corners with a sweep of his beam. Let's get started, he said, his voice steady. Ellie rolled her eyes as she pulled streamers from a box. Ghosts don't exist. This place is just old, not haunted. Ellie said with a slight tremor in her voice, more a statement to herself than anything else. They spread out, each to their own corner of the forsaken factory, dragging decorations along with them. Christian strung up lights, the bulbs flickering to life. Emma draped silver tinsel along a rusted conveyor belt, the contrast between the festive garland and the decayed metal stark and jarring. A sudden clamor echoed from above, something between a groan and a screech. Christian froze, his heart thudding. He exchanged a look with Michael, who paused, mid-step, frowning at the ceiling. The noise didn't repeat. Old building settling, Michael finally muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Tina laughed off the sound, twirling with a string of fairy lights. Makes it feel like a proper adventure. But even she glanced upwards. The group continued their work, but the atmosphere had shifted imperceptibly. Christian's hands shook slightly as he taped down a banner. Unexplained creaks and sighs whispered through the vast space, each one making Ellie's skepticism falter, her dismissive facade cracking. Did you guys hear that? Emma's voice quivered as she looked around, her earlier apprehension turned into fear. Probably just the wind, Christian offered, though the stillness of the air belied his words. They worked in tense silence, jumping at the smallest sounds, the joy of celebration bleeding away into a growing sense of foreboding. The shadows appeared longer now, the light dimmer, as if the darkness was slowly consuming the glow they tried to cast. As Christian stepped back, taking in their handiwork, the feeling of being watched crept over him. He shivered, suddenly aware of the vast emptiness surrounding them, the weight of solitude pressing against his chest. Let's just finish up, so we can get this party going, he suggested, his voice barely above a whisper, his own anxiety seeping through the facade of calm he tried to maintain. The friends nodded, their movements hurried and jittery. They felt it too, the presence of something unseen, something not quite right about this desolate place they had hoped to fill with laughter and life. Christian's heart hammered against his ribcage as a deafening boom ricocheted through the textile factory. The walls shuddered, dust and debris raining down upon them. For a moment, time stilled, the echo of what sounded like explosion hanging in the air. Illegal fireworks set off by nearby people struck the entrance to the factory. Everyone okay? It was barely a whisper, his voice strangled by the thick, choking dust that clouded the room. One by one the muffled responses of here, followed by a confused what was that? Christian's eyes stung, the particles in the air turning the world into a grainy, sepia-toned nightmare. He blinked furiously, trying to make sense of the chaos. The entrance they had come through was no more. In its place, a mountain of rubble stood, a silent sentinel blocking their escape. Ellie's finger shot up, pointing towards the top of the entrance they had entered through. Her eyes widened as she saw a word etched into the crumbling walls. The path was now blocked by concrete and debris, making their only exit impossible. The word carved on the wall read "Ye." It hung there with no context or explanation, leaving them confused and anxious. Only the faint light from a dropped phone illuminated the mysterious word above them. Ye. What does it mean? Emma's voice trembled, her earlier fear now fully materialized in the face of their entrapment. Doesn't matter, Christian snapped. We need to find another way out. The group moved, probing the darkness for an exit. Christian led, his mind racing. The factory was a labyrinth, its corridors and rooms a tangle of shadows and silence. Up might lead to windows, Christian reasoned, though doubt gnawed at him. Let's go then, Ellie said, her voice said with a hint of fear. They ascended, each step into the unknown. Christian's thoughts spiraled, grappling with the reality of their plight. What if he was a warning? His mind recoiled from the implications, focusing instead on the tangible, the feel of the railing under his grip, the sound of their collective breaths. Keep moving, he said, his words less command and more plea. Christian. Emma's whisper cut through his reveries. Not now, he shot back, leading them away from the explosion, away from the word that seemed both omen and taunt. Ye. The thought whispered in his mind, but he pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand, escape. The mystery of the message would have to wait. For now, the only truth that mattered was the pounding of their hearts, and the hope that somewhere in this forsaken place, there was a way out. The dim glow of their flashlights danced across the interior of the AHA textile factory, painting shadows on the walls. Dust swirled through beams of light as the group picked their way through the debris, the silence thick enough to choke on. Over there, Ellie's voice barely rose above a whisper, pointing towards a shape suspended in the darkness. It swung gently, a silent pendulum in the still air. They approached, their lights revealing a faceless doll. Christian's gut clenched tight. The doll's dress fluttered slightly, as though breathing. From the doll's neck hung a tag, scrawled with a single word, Who? Emma's breath hitched, a soft sound of distress. Michael's hand found hers, his grip firm. Christian watched her face, saw her eyes brim with unshed tears. He wanted to reach out, to offer solace, but his own heart raced a frantic tempo. Who? The question hovered between them, a specter they couldn't shake. Christian scanned the area, seeking logic where there was none. Dolls didn't hang themselves. Notes didn't write themselves. Let's keep moving, Michael said. They all nodded, but no one moved. In the shadows, unnoticed by the five friends, a silhouette detached itself from the murk. Tall, indistinct, it loomed, an observer shrouded in darkness. The mysterious figure trailed them, a presence biding its time. Christian turned, his senses spoke to him. Something felt off, but the flashlight revealed only empty space. His thoughts churned. The feeling of being watched gnawed at him, insistent, terrifying. Stick together, he murmured, more to himself than to the others. They needed to stay united. The doll was a message, but from whom? And why? And what does who mean? Ellie scoffed under her breath, a sound that was quickly swallowed by the emptiness around them. Skepticism was her armor, but even she couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. Which way? Tina said, her spirit undampened. But beneath her bravado, Christian saw the strain in her smile, the uncertainty in her gaze. Forward, he replied. Forward into the unknown, into the dark. Their footsteps echoed. Christian's eyes strained against the gloom, every shadow a potential threat. The distant boom and crackle of fireworks bled through the factory walls, mocking their predicament with bursts of celebratory light that flickered like ghostly fireflies. Did you guys see that? Emma's voice trembled as she pointed toward the boarded-up windows, her usual warmth swallowed by her fear. The flashes from outside cast an eerie dance of light and shadow across the group. In that deceptive glow, a shape moved, a silent hunter in the darkness. Christian felt the shift before he saw it. Wait, where's, Michael began, but his words cut off as they realized Tina was no longer among them. Ellie, call out. Christian ordered, a command born from desperation rather than authority. He spun around, flashlight sweeping frantically over piles of debris and rusted machinery. Here, came Ellie's reply, too close, too choked with panic. But Tina's voice did not join the chorus. Silence had claimed her. Split up. Find her, Michael said, calling for action. His figure was rigid. Christian's heart hammered as he searched. An icy gust whispered through broken windows, carrying the scent of moist and cold sweat. Emma's sobs were soft, muffled by her hands as she peered behind barrels and under discarded fabric rolls. "Tina," she gasped, barely loud enough to be heard over the drumming of Christian's pulse. Ellie's hand trembled as she held the flashlight, her beam bouncing off the peeling wallpaper and cracked plaster. "Nothing here," she said with a sigh. They regrouped. For sets of eyes met, a silent conversation of fear. Christian's mind raced. How did Tina just disappear? Michael's raspy voice cut through the air, urging them to keep moving. Christian reminded the group to stay alert, although it was unnecessary. Their senses were sharp, every creak and groan of the old factory sending shivers down their spines. "Find Tina," Emma whispered to herself, her plea of fragile hope fluttering against the suffocating darkness. As they moved deeper into the belly of the AHA factory, the laughter and cheer from the world outside became a distant dream. Christian's heart hammered against his ribs. They shuffled through the debris, the harsh scrape of metal on concrete underlining their frantic search. Here, Michael's voice sliced through the silence, barely above a whisper, yet it boomed in Christian's ears. They converged on him, finding a body slumped against the wall. Not Tina. The group became even more frightened as they saw the body, causing panic to spread among them. Moonlight crept through a crack in the ceiling, casting a glow upon the corpse. A word scrawled in old dried-up blood across its forehead screamed at them, "Enter." Christian's stomach churned. The dead man's glassy eyes offered no answers, only reflected the horror etched on their faces. "Enter?" Ellie echoed the question without meaning to, her skepticism smothered by the reality before her. No one answered. They didn't need to. Emma turned away, her shoulders shaking. Christian reached out, tentative, feeling her tremble beneath his touch. He wanted to say something comforting, but fear clogged his throat. Michael signaled to the rest of the group, indicating a pile of old tools and scrap metal on the ground ahead. Without hesitation, he began distributing them among the group. These would be their weapons, their only means of defense in this dangerous place. They had to protect themselves at all costs. "Survive," was all Michael replied. Christian wrapped a piece of cloth around one end of a long, thin shard, fashioning a crude spear. Christian signaled to the others to stay sharp, stay alert. Ellie clutched her makeshift weapon, knuckles white. Emma hesitated, her eyes swimming with tears, then snatched a hefty bolt from the ground. It wasn't much, but it gave weight to her shaky grip. Emma straightened her posture, pulling her shoulders back in a desperate attempt to convince herself to keep going. The four stood, an unlikely band of warriors, clutching their scrap metal like lifelines. They all knew, the factory was a hunting ground and they were the prey. Christian's grip tightened around his spear, the metal cold and unyielding in his hand. The echo of their footsteps filled the factory, every shadow, every silence fueled their fear. They moved as a unit. "Where?" Emma's whispered, the word hanging unfinished in the thick air. The group moved on, unaware that Emma was gone. "Keep moving," Michael answered, his eyes scanning the darkness. He led them through the decrepit assembly lines. Christian's breath came in short bursts, fogging the air before him. His mind raced, thoughts fragmenting under the weight of panic. They had been 5. Now only 4 remained, the odds dwindling with each heartbeat. A shape detached itself from the shadows, a silhouette, distant but distinct. It stood motionless, an observer to their plight. Christian felt its gaze, a pressure on his skin, an itch he couldn't scratch. He didn't point it out, there was no need. They all felt it. "Keep your eyes peeled," he muttered instead. "Should be here," Michael said, more to himself than the others, as they reached the spot where Tina was last seen. There was nothing, no sign of her, no indication of struggle or flight. Only emptiness, a void where a friend should have been. As the group turned, Emma was nowhere to be seen, causing Ellie to panic and cry as she collapsed to the ground. She slowly came to terms with the overwhelming fear that consumed her. "Michael." Ellie's voice trailed off, her tears and cries drowned by the sheer silence. "Focus," he commanded, almost robotic. Christian locked onto Michael's back. The factory seemed to close in around them, walls pressing closer, air growing staler. Christian's heart thundered, a drumbeat of terror. With each step, they descended deeper into the unknown, the silhouette a silent sentinel to their descent. Christian's gaze cut through the dimness, latching onto a staircase spiraling upward. "There," he whispered, muscles tensed for ascent. The stairs creaked under their collective weight. "Could be a way out," Michael said, jaw set, eyes scanning the darkness above. His voice was a low rumble. Ellie followed, her breath shallow. She clutched at the railing, knuckles white. Christian read the fear on her face, a mirror of his own. The upper floor loomed, silent as a crypt. Dust particles danced in the beam of Michael's flashlight, a ghostly ballet. Shadows stretched, contorted. Christian's pulse hammered in his ears. "Feels like we're not alone," Ellie murmured, unsettling the three. Christian nodded, mouth dry. He could almost taste the dread that seeped from the walls. They moved together, a tight unit, eyes darting to every corner, expecting something. Michael led, his body language speaking of courage, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wide, vigilant. Christian's mind raced with possibilities. A groan from beneath them frightened the friends. The floor gave way with a violent snap. Wood splintered, steel bent, the world tilted. Christian's stomach lurched as they plummeted, the ground rushing up to greet them with unforgiving speed. They crashed through layers of decay, the impact stealing the air from their lungs. Debris cascaded around them, a hailstorm of ruin. Dust choked their cries, filled their mouths with grit. "Everyone okay?" It was Christian's voice, strained, barely slicing through the cacophony of settling rubble. "Here," came Ellie's coughing reply. "Alive," grunted Michael, somewhere to Christian's left. They regrouped, adrenaline surging, pain flaring in response to battered bodies. Now 2 floors down. Christian's thoughts spun, grasping for logic, for reason, finding none. Fear clawed at his chest. "Up isn't safe," he managed to say, his voice hoarse, tasting blood. "We need another way." In the shadow-strewn aftermath of their fall, Christian's eyes adjusted to the dimness. Ragged breaths, as he scanned the debris-laden pit they'd landed in. The silence was a tangible thing, broken only by the occasional drip of water from unseen pipes. "Help," a voice barely whispered from the darkness. A frigid touch of dread snaked down Christian's spine. It was Tina's voice, faint, desperate. "Over here," Michael responded, his tone commanding. He led the way, Christian and Ellie close behind, moving through the rubble with hands outstretched, seeking the familiar in the darkness. They found them huddled together, Tina, pale as moonlight against the soot-stained floor, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Beside her, still and silent, lay Emma, her open eyes reflecting nothing but the void that had claimed her. "Emma." Ellie's voice cracked, the word hanging heavy in the air. Tina's hand twitched, her fingers blindly reaching out, grasping life. Christian knelt beside her. "Stay with us," he urged. Michael checked for signs of injury, his movements efficient despite his trembling hands. "We need to move her, carefully." Tina's eyelids fluttered, fighting the pull of unconsciousness. Her lips moved, a murmur lost in the expanse. "Can you stand?" Christian's question was gentle. With Michael's support, they hoisted Tina upright. She swayed, a reed in an unforgiving wind, agony etched on her face. Ellie wrapped an arm around her, lending strength. Unspoken but present in everyone's thoughts, how do we get out? It's a rhetorical question, left unanswered but constantly on their minds. Christian turned. There, beyond a tangle of machinery, a staircase spiraled downward. Above it, words carved into the wall with cruel precision, "Here." "Down," Christian said, his throat tight. "Our only way now." Michael doubted the safety of going further down, but where else would they venture, in the search of an exit? No words needed to be spoken, they all understood. The descent loomed ahead. They cautiously approached the stairway. Here, Ellie breathed, the word a curse. Combined it read out, "Ye who enter here." Ellie frightened by the words, slowly realizing their fate. The echo of their passage filled the stairwell. With each downward step, the weight of the earth pressed closer. Despair clung to them. Ahead, the unknown awaited. The ominous here etched above haunted their very steps, a silent scream from the walls themselves. Michael's grip tightened on Tina, who limped, half-carried between them. "Keep close," Christian whispered, his voice barely carrying over their synchronized shuffling. "Feels like it never ends," Michael muttered, more to himself than the others. Ellie's heart drummed a frantic rhythm. What lies ahead? She thought to herself. Should have never come. A sudden chill swept through the corridor, and a shape detached from the shadows, a tall, gaunt figure, indistinct yet terrifyingly present. It stood still. The flashlight flickered. "Back!" Christian hissed. They retreated, but the path behind had shifted, closed off by debris unnoticed before. Trapped. Ellie felt the walls lean in. "We can't go back," Christian hissed. Tina whimpered, a sound of raw vulnerability that tugged at Ellie. This is really happening. Her mind screamed for escape, for light, for life beyond this place. "Stay together," Michael said, his tone flat, resigned. The figure did not advance, merely watched. They stood, for hearts hammering against the silence, each second stretching into eternity. "Down," Christian finally said, the decision heavy on his tongue. Ellie nodded, numb. They moved forward once more, leaving the silent watcher behind. Ahead, only darkness awaited. The stairwell spiraled down. Ellie's flashlight beam drowned in the abyss. They descended. "Did you hear that?" Michael whispered. "Hear what?" Christian's response was an echo of denial. "Shoo," Tina's finger to her lips. A dark and silent whisper was surrounding them, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter." "Keep moving," Christian commanded. "Can't see a thing," said Michael, his hand brushing against the cold wall for guidance. Ellie's breaths came fast, terror sharpened her senses. The words rang in her skull. "Abandon all hope." "Help!" Tina screamed. But there was no one who could hear. Christian begged for silence, trying to think of what to do. "Please," Tina's pleas suffocated. Ellie managed to find Tina's hand, clinging together with desperation. The darkness pressed closer, the moist air filling their mouths and lungs. Screams tore from their throats. No one would hear. No one would come. Can't breathe," Michael gasped. With beads of sweat forming on his forehead, Christian urged the group to keep moving forward. His eyes darted from side to side, searching for any sign of safety. He couldn't take another minute of this terror, and so he begged and longed for it to end. A whisper curled around their ankles, slithering upwards, suffocating. "Abandon all hope," it hissed again, as a sinister lullaby. "Did you hear that?" Michael whispered. Christian didn't respond, but his jaw tightened. Ellie's heart galloped. She squeezed Tina's hand tighter, willing her warmth into the girl who trembled. "Where is it coming from?" Tina mouthed, no sound coming from her lips. Christian trying to ignore his own fear among group, gesturing to keep moving. "Can't see." Michael's breath fogged the air. Ellie gestured for silence, bringing a finger to her lips. Below, something waited. "Who is that?" Tina's question shattered into fragments. "Nothing." But Christian's denial rang false even to his own ears. They descended further down the spiraled stairway. "Is this hell?" The words escaped Ellie before she could swallow them, bitter on her tongue. "Quiet," Christian breathed. Tina's eyes full of tears, crying and praying for help. "Something's here," Michael murmured. "Stay together," Christian demanded. Christian's heart throbbed in his throat. Desperation clung to them. Their breaths, short and sharp, cut through the stillness as they huddled together. Michael's hand found Christian's shoulder, a grip meant to steady, yet it trembled. "This way," he whispered. The group shrank closer, bodies pressing for comfort they couldn't find. Christian could feel the pulsing fear from Emma beside him. They stumbled forward, feet unsure, arms outstretched, blind in the relentless black. Their lights had for some time now, leaving the group in utter darkness. They reached a door, its surface cold. Michael fumbled along its edges, fingers desperate. A click, subtle as a whisper, broke the tension. Light from an unseen source crept through the widening crack as the door opened. Beyond lay a labyrinth of corridors stretching further in. Christian squinted, trying to discern shapes in the murk, imagining paths. The air here was different, thick with the scent of rust and moist. Needless to say, Michael urged the group to stay close. Tina's hand slipped into Christian's. They stepped into the maze of hallways, the door behind them shutting with a definitive finality that echoed loud. Inside, the walls felt like they were closing in, the ceiling pressing down. With each twist and turn, the group moved as one, a single entity propelled by the instinct to find freedom. "Keep moving," Christian thought, though he didn't speak it. They turned a corner, and another, the sense of direction lost to them now. Each hallway blended into the next. The darkness wasn't just around them, it was within. "Stay strong," Michael's voice trembled. Christian's mind whirred, thoughts fragmented and disjointed. He clung to the feeling of Tina's hand in his. Somewhere in this twisted warren, there had to be an end, an exit, a return to starry night skies. But with each step, each turn, the maze only seemed to grow, an endless puzzle. And in the distance, just beyond the reach of strained senses, the mysterious person loomed, a silhouette in the dark. Christian's heart pounded relentless, urging his limbs forward. A labyrinthine corridor yawned ahead. The memories were parasites, burrowing deep. Who? The lifeless doll, the silhouette. They clung to the edges of his mind. Left, Michael's command was terse. They veered, footsteps in sync. Christian felt the tug at his hand falter. He tightened his grip on Tina, pulling her along, refusing to let go. "Here." Emma's voice cracked. She pressed against a cold wall. A faint rustling, a shiver down Christian's spine, Ellie's breath caught, a silent scream. Can't be." Ellie's words stumbled. Christian's eyes strained for a sign, any sign, but found none. His thoughts raced, every option crumbling. They couldn't stay, yet every path teased salvation, only to snuff it out with blind turns and dead ends. "Focus," he whispered, the word barely slipping past his lips. "Must be." Michael's voice trailed off, unfinished. A metallic clang echoed. Nothing felt certain, yet abandoning the search meant abandoning themselves. "Keep quiet," Christian thought, his head screaming it. Tina's grip slackened, then tensed, a silent communication of shared terror. Christian's mind painted images of freedom.
"Abandon all hope.
The whispers continued once again. "Forward," Christian urged. The mysterious person watched. Christian could feel it. The friends moved, trying to escape, to see freedom once again, to experience another New Year's Eve, but a peaceful one. Christian's pulse thrummed in his ears. Ahead, the path continued to weave its cruel pattern, corridors stretching like the limbs of some great beast. "Must be." Tina tried again, her voice hoarse. Christian put his finger to his lips. The weight of their situation pressed the need for silence. The hallways felt endless, leaving the friends with little to no hope of ever finding a way out. Their search grew frantic, hands groping along walls slick with the residue of forgotten industry. Every dead end mocked them, every scrap of metal in their hands a false promise of defense. In the bowels of the AHA factory, darkness clung to Christian and his friends like a second skin. The air, thick with dust and despair, became a tangible force against which they struggled. Christian's eyes, once trustful of logic and light, now scanned the dark for threats unseen. "Abandon all hope," a voice whispered. The group now lost in the many hallways, not easing their mind as they continued. The feeling of being watched at every turn kept creeping upon the friends. Ye who enter. The whisper continued. Can't trust what we see, Michael breathed. Or what we hear, Ellie added. The whisper kept on abandon. The mysterious person felt close, so close, tantalizing their senses with a nearly tangible presence. They could almost hear the predator's breath, it was so close. They had but only one option, keep moving. Enter here, the whisper continued in small bits. Pressed against the cold, damp wall, Christian shivered. A sudden flicker of bright light appeared. The light revealed the source of their fear, a man, his face disfigured and covered in scars and burns. The group let out screams as everything went dark. Christian's hands tightened around his spear, and he threw it towards where he had seen the man. They heard the sound of the spear hitting the wall and then falling to the ground. The friends ran at full speed, desperate to escape the man chasing them. Tina stumbled and fell, letting out a short scream before going silent. Christian shouted, "Shit! Run!" As the group pressed on, they came across a narrow staircase leading up. But when they reached the top, a heavy metal door blocked their path, sealed shut with no signs of light leaking through its edges. "Shoo, listen," Ellie whispered, crying with tears running down her face, tightening her grip on Michael's hand. Footsteps coming ever so close, then slowing down. A heavy breathing was heard, but it wasn't coming from any of the friends. At once, Michael's grip on Ellie disappeared. Michael fell to the ground and dragged away in an instant. He made no sound, and only noises were heard, noises of tearing flesh and bones cracking. Ellie cried, praying, trying to hold on to Christian. "New Year," Christian said. "Ellie, I just..." Christian's final words were cut short as he collapsed onto the ground, lifeless. His own spear had been thrown by the hunter had pierced his chest. Ellie's body trembles with sobs as she collapses onto the ground, her head buried in her knees. She rocks back and forth as tears stream down her face. The weight of her grief and fear is crushing. She started murmuring, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." A flash appeared as she looked up. The burnt face of the man was before. A blood-curdling scream escapes her lips for a split second before all sound is drowned out by an eerie silence that fills the air.